Hello, thank you for tuning into the Natural Health Rising podcast. My name is Rachel Smith. I am a certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, and I've helped hundreds of people naturally reverse symptoms of autoimmune diseases and other health challenges, from digestive issues to hormone imbalances. And in these weekly episodes, you're going to learn from myself and top health experts from around the world about functional medicine and holistic health tips to help you rise to your healthiest, happiest self. Welcome to the Natural Health Rising podcast. I am really excited about this episode because it is totally out of the ordinary for this podcast. And if you are a skeptic, before we even get into this topic, I'm going to encourage you to stick around and learn more, because I think that this episode can change your perspective on a lot of things when it comes to astrology and the stars and the planets, and using those to actually help guide our lives and even learn more about ourselves. So my guest today, her name is Samantha. She's an astrologer, a ceremonialist, a divination practitioner, and I'll tell you a little bit more about her in a second, but I'd love to just share a story of how I even met this person and why I am having her on the show. So I met Samantha a couple years ago when I was living in Costa Rica. I was in Samara, Costa Rica, or Samara. And prior to meeting her, I had used astrology a little bit in my life, but I barely knew how it worked. And I would pretty much just use random astrology apps or read my horoscope online. And even back in the day, I used to read my horoscope in magazines as a teenager, which you'll learn in this episode that's not very accurate or helpful. So shortly after I met her, I had her do a natal chart reading for me, which you will learn what a natal chart is today. And I was totally blown away by what she told me about my entire life with precision based upon the stars and the planets. And I had this review that she did for me saved on a video, and I decided to review it about 2 months ago. And I was so astonished at the accuracy of what she had predicted would happen during that 2-year gap, now looking back. And so as I watched this video, I realized that also I had started something called my Saturn return this year back in March. And just about that time, I started to feel really strange. I felt like some things were going sideways. I felt like I didn't really want to live in America for a little bit. Just lots of different things were coming up for me. And I didn't really understand why I was feeling that way, because the past couple of years living in Arizona, I was fine. I was loving it. I made amazing friends, great community. And watching that video and realizing that it actually allowed me to pull the trigger to move abroad. And so as I'm recording this right now, I'm living in Spain. And a couple weeks ago, Samantha did some more readings for me, and she continued to blow me away. So I was like, okay, this is enough. I have to have her come on the show and explain this to people and teach everybody how valuable this type of information can be for your life. And I actually move differently through life now because of understanding this astrology. And it's helped me make these big decisions and even reconsider where I want to live and travel. And we'll talk more about that too, trying to understand where should you live or travel in the world based upon your astrology. And you'll also learn, this is a health and wellness podcast in general. And so you're going to learn some ways that you can use astrology for your health with something called medical astrology, which I think is really cool. And Samantha gives a ton of resources on who to go for or who to go to for this, different books that you can read, different websites that you can go to just learn more about astrology and yourself in general. She has a lot of other tips. And she is just such a wealth of knowledge. So again, if you are a skeptic of this type of stuff, I trust that this episode will change your view. And if it doesn't, I can almost guarantee that if you book a session with Samantha online, that you will 100% believe in this and she will change your mind. Really quick before I get into the episode, I want to read just a couple reviews. So the first one I'm going to read is an Apple podcast review. And this is by RJR, who said, Rachel is so informed about functional medicine and root causes of illness. I love her explanations and her comprehensive approach. So thank you so much, whoever RJR is, for writing that. This is one from a year ago. And if you have been listening to my podcast for a while, maybe since the beginning, or if you're newer here and you've been enjoying it, then I would really appreciate it if you just take a quick 30 seconds to a minute to pause this episode and leave a rating and leave a quick comment about what you really enjoy about this podcast, so that it can help not just boost the ratings, but when that happens, then more people will see the show and more people will be able to get important health information to help them live a healthier, happier life, which is really my goal. Guys, I do this podcast for free, okay? I don't have to put this information out there. I literally do this because I enjoy doing it. And I want as many people to also have a free resource. If they can't work with me specifically, if they can't work with another functional medicine practitioner, I'm trying to bring free education to the globe. So I want you to share this show or comment, rate on this show to help really drive home that mission of why I'm even doing this show, because this takes a lot of time out of my week. And again, I don't have to do it, but I love doing it. Right. And a quick comment on that, you'll learn in this episode, Samantha says a couple things about my chart, and there's actually a lot of interesting things that link back to the fact that I like to work with the public. I like to do this whole type of global outreach and speaking and writing and all of that too. So really interesting aspect of my chart, and shows up in my life very accurately with what I do. Another thing I want to read very quickly, this is going to be a short one, is a client testimonial or a client review from Jennifer Howard. And she said, Natural Health Rising, or Rachel, is one of the best things I've ever done for myself to become a healthier me. I came to her with some health issues and situations that had been getting progressively worse for 2 years. She had been so proactive in helping me from day one, which I needed. Her health plan is helping me to lose weight, have more energy, feel better about myself, and is helping me emotionally. The training classes are a huge eye-opening experience. Since being on her plan, I no longer crave sweets. I have a clear head and overall feel like I am 20 years younger. All of my prior illnesses are gone. I feel fantastic, and I've been able to do more in my life. I highly recommend Rachel. Thank you so much, Jennifer Howard, for that incredible review. And I like to share these reviews on the podcast because it just helps people to see the power of holistic health and functional medicine. And if you're somebody who you just heard that, you're like, oh my gosh, I need more energy, I want to feel 20 years younger. I want to also improve myself emotionally and have all of these, have all my prior illnesses go away, then I highly encourage you to head to the show notes and click the free consultation link. You can apply for that. And that's where we just sit down for anywhere between like 45 minutes to 60 minutes. And we dive deep into your health history, talking about what's going on, what are your goals. And then I'm able to really assess if I can help you or not. And if it's a go, if I feel like I can definitely help you and get you these type of results like Jennifer had, then we can talk about what it's like to work together and get you started ASAP so that you can be on a path to improved overall health. Now, without further ado, I'm going to read Samantha's bio here. So as I said before, Samantha is an astrologer, a ceremonialist, and a divination practitioner that is passionate about the power of storytelling, ancestral healing, and intentional gathering to inspire personal growth and collective progress. She started practicing divination through the Rider-Waite tarot as a teenager and found astrology in her early 20s while pursuing her childhood passion of acting in Los Angeles. Like many during the pandemic, she was called to dive deeper into her spiritual practice and connection to the natural world. The past 2 years, she has studied the Mayan cosmovision and cacao under her Mayan teachers in Guatemala. Her current work involves weaving Western astrology and Mayan cosmology for profound insights on the cycles of our personal and collective destinies. She offers one-on-one astrological and tarot consultations through her business, Hands of Mercury. Enjoy this episode with myself and Samantha. Welcome to the show, Samantha.
Thanks so much for having me, Rachel. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. I was just telling you before we pressed record that I'm almost more excited for this than other podcasts because it's just like a fun topic and it's different, and it is a newer interest of mine over the last few years, actually after meeting you and really learning a lot more about astrology and just how much it can actually impact your life and how true it can be too, which we'll dive actually more into that because I think this is a good place to start. I'm assuming that a lot of people listening to this show have no clue what astrology is or how useful it can be. I'm going to assume that people listening might know one thing about their astrology, which is their sun sign. So that's like, okay, if someone says, what's your astrology sign or when were you born? Well, I was born January 7th. So that means I'm a Capricorn. So most people know that. And these people usually just know some general things they've read online, like, oh, this specific sign means that I'm a hard worker or whatever aligns with their sign. But I don't think these people realize that there are a lot of other different aspects of astrology. And in order to really understand yourself and use astrology to move through life better, you need to understand those different aspects and understand what your natal chart is. And yeah, I'm speaking from experience of like the lack of knowledge part, because when I met you a few years ago, I honestly didn't understand astrology all that well, besides the fact that I'm a Capricorn. So I want to start with the basics of what is a natal chart. And then if you can just give like a broad overview of how this can accurately tell us about our lives.
So the natal chart is a snapshot of the cosmos, of our solar system, when we are born. It's the moment when the head is crowning and we are coming into this world. And at that moment, it's like the map of the sky is inlaid into our spirit, our body, our lifetime here. And what's great about the natal chart is that we can not only get some accuracy on certain behavioral patterns, certain quirks. We get to look at mom and dad, family, siblings. We get to look at where our skills lie in this life, where our challenges are. And so with this natal chart, we get to see different places where we're going to have strengths and challenges, as well as timing of when we might be encountering certain life events, certain auspicious meetings with people who are going to change or pivot the direction or course of our life. And so that's something that is really profound about working with the natal chart and not just the sun sign, right? So a lot of people do get introduced to astrology through the magazines or through, your news websites like AOL and Yahoo back in the day would have your little daily horoscope on the side, and it would tell you about your sun sign. But really, actually, a better way to look at your horoscope, a pro tip for those who want to start observing and learning through the horoscope, would actually be to look at the rising sign. So the rising sign is going to be the sign where the eastern horizon was at the time that you were born. And that is a really important core archetypal aspect of your personality, of the theme of your life, as much as the sun or the moon. And so really, when astrologers are writing horoscopes, you're going to get more accuracy based on the houses that are laid out according to your rising sign. So if you can look up on astro.com is a great place to start if you want to dive into your natal chart. looking up your natal chart, and then it'll say the ascendant, the ASC, or the rising sign, and you can start to read the horoscope from that perspective. So when I think about the natal chart, it's like the Pink Floyd album of Dark Side of the Moon, right? We have that prism where there's pure white light. And when it hits the prism at a certain angle, we get this beautiful rainbow. And with everybody, we have this rising sign, and it almost acts as the prism through which we are now coloring our life. So that's why somebody who is a Virgo rising is going to have very different outlooks on certain themes of life than someone who might be a Capricorn rising or a Scorpio rising. So the ascendant is really important because it lays out the entire chart. And one more thing I want to say is that some people don't have their birth time. Actually, in astrology, I would say it's really a privilege to have an accurate birth time. A lot of the older generations didn't have those records on file, and especially in certain other countries, they might not have put it down as well. There's also countries where it's auspicious to have a certain birth time. So you might find in India, a lot of people happen to just be born around sunrise because that's an auspicious time to be born. That might not necessarily be the accurate birth time. But there is something called chart rectification. There are certain astrologers that are really skilled in helping you through your life experiences and through an interview, really getting to understand clues into finding that rising sign. So fret not if you don't have your birth time. There are ways to work with an astrologer to rectify the chart and try to find that correct rising sign.
Okay, so I didn't know that the time you were born specifically is what dictates the rising sign specifically.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. So let's give some people a taste of how accurate maybe this could be, because I definitely remember reading Cosmopolitan magazine when I was a teenager and things like that, and being like, oh, I'm a Capricorn, and reading that and trying to base my love life and all of these things off of it, which is, but now that I understand so much more, it's so powerful. So let's say you use my chart, for example. Um, what does it mean if I'm okay, I'm a Capricorn sun, I'm an Aries moon, I'm a Taurus rising? Is there something specific that you can pick out of that and be like, okay, this means blank for you?
So right off the bat, I would be looking at the Taurus rising and looking to where Venus is in the chart. So for you, that's going to be in Sagittarius. And I'm going to be looking at not only the themes of Sagittarius and Taurus, I'm also looking at that Capricorn sun and seeing, wow, this chart already has a lot of grounding, a lot of practicality. This is someone who might think a little bit more pragmatically. Yes, willing to take some risks. Sagittarius loves freedom, loves expansion, and loves growth. So that's definitely going to be coming forward through your natal Venus and Jupiter sign in Sagittarius. But as well, that Taurus and Capricorn really is going to enjoy the slow and steady and methodical progress. This is somebody who knows that they need to put in consistency, they need to put in a plan, and they need to be rooted in the ground in some way. This isn't someone who's going to be flying high in the sky, always kind of in the imagination, in the realm of possibilities. You really want to go, I want to bring something down from the realm of possibilities and ground it and make it something that's going to last, especially with that Capricorn sun. The Capricorn sun is really interested in legacy. And we have a little bit of that Sagittarius influence coming through the ninth house as well. And that's where you have your natal sun. So this is someone who is interested in higher learning, philosophy, the wisdom of life, the bigger picture, working with a global audience, not just in our local neighborhood, our local community. This is someone who's going to be interested in different cultures, in international travel, which, as we know, we met in Costa Rica. I also have a ninth house sun, so I can really relate to your ninth house sun. So we love that sense of freedom and exploration, but we also like the grounding. So we like to have a home base and a space where we really do get to root down in some way. So that would be an important part of your chart. And as well, you have your midheaven in Aquarius, and that's going to be as well that place of public recognition, of the consolidation of all your goals in life and outward success as well. And Aquarius is alternative. It's the future, it's progress, and it's the sign of the humanitarian. So I would also say that you are somebody who is looking to move in a career way that might not be with the norm or teeters between the line of tradition, because you definitely understand you need to learn the fundamentals from the Capricorn side, learn the tradition in order to progress something forward and bring in the alternative healing, the alternative structures, the technology or the innovation in some way that is kind of pushing our boundary into new growth.
Okay. I will say that that is all very accurate. Very methodical and consistent and obsessed with growth and learning and the bigger picture. And obviously I have this podcast to reach a global audience.
Which
I
also that third and ninth house are the houses of writing, publishing, broadcasting,
mhm.
YouTube. All of those things are going to be in those communication heavy houses. So that really does make sense for your ninth house sun. And you also have some of those generational planets, Uranus and Neptune, in there as well. So that checks out, Rachel.
Oh yes, everything you've ever told me is so accurate. What about now? Obviously, this is mostly a health podcast, health and lifestyle, but where does health fit into the natal chart?
Okay, so there's a few places that I'm going to look when it comes to health. And there is a whole branch of astrology called medical astrology. And these are people who can actually have some sense of diagnostic work. And we can look to all of the 12 zodiac signs are correlating to different parts of the body. So I would really say a medical astrologer needs to be well versed in anatomy and physiology, in human biology, and have some sort of requisite on that side if you're looking for a qualified medical astrologer. And that's not something that I do, but I do like to look at some of the basics in terms of the medical astrology side and the correlations that might come through. So, when I'm looking specifically at the natal chart, we're going to be looking at the first house because that's that house of self, of identity, and it can relate to the body, the physical form in that first house. We also have the house of health coming from the sixth house. That's physical health, but also the maintenance that we need to do for our health. And in traditional astrology, this is also a place where we will have ailments that come up that we need to address to get back to baseline. So if we're going to have some sort of physical ailment come up, I could see that possibly in the sixth house. The 12th house, its sister sign, is also going to be a health related house. This is more of the unseen suffering. So this is where we would see somebody that might have more mental health issues. In the sixth house, if you break your leg, people can see that you're on crutches, your leg is broken, that you are healing. In the 12th house, it can be somebody suffering from addiction, some suffering from mental health, and it can be a little bit more behind the back in the background, behind the scenes, where you might not be able to see it right at the top, but they are working through some sort of mental, psychological, even spiritual health. If you are in the school of reincarnation or past lives, that can also be coming through in the 12th house of physical ailments or even ancestral ailments that want to come through. And that also can tie a little bit into the fourth house. So those are the houses in the chart. And then we look at certain planets as well. So the sun is related to our vitality, to our consciousness, to our health as well. So when it's being afflicted, we might feel a sense of drain. And then the moon is related to our body. So we can think of the moon being that matter, the flesh, the body that houses the consciousness of the sun. So that's where I would be looking when I'm doing some health stuff. There's one other like little but potent aspect I'd be looking at, and that's Chiron. That is an asteroid that's located between Mars and Jupiter. And there's a few asteroids in that belt that are actually quite nice to work with and look at. And this is the wounded healer. And I find Chiron is very prevalent in charts where people can either have some sort of chronic illness or they are going to be working in the healing capacities. So if you've got Chiron in the first, Chiron in the 10th, you might be somebody that is going to be offering some sort of healing service in your own life. And as you know, intimately, a lot of healers usually go through an initiation of their own through having to work through their own illness, chronic illness, disease, or injury, because a healer has to know the depths of that place as well, to provide better healing for other people as well, right? We have to receive that first in order to give. So that's very much intertwined in the chart as well.
Okay, I'm gonna ask for some clarification on a few of these, but let's talk about Chiron since we're on that. I have that, I believe,
Mhm.
in, is it my 10th house? Or where is that?
You have Chiron in the 5th house in Virgo. And
Okay.
Virgo is related in some ways in modern astrology. It's tied to that 6th house energy. So this is our physical health, our maintenance of our health, our daily habits, routines, and going through the purification process. Virgo is very much about the purifying of the mind and the spirit and the body. So with Chiron in the 5th for you, that's going to be a place where you actually find a sense of joy, a sense of pleasure from the act of the healing, from the act of the healing process. I know
Mhm.
that sounds a little counterintuitive, but there's actually a sense of pleasure that comes from the 5th house, when we are purifying, when we are taking care of ourselves. So you're somebody who I would say like that's a really powerful healing space for you, is like self-care and good health. That is fundamental for you in order to actually have fun and receive more pleasure in your life.
Mm. And that would be accurate. I mean, I did go through chronic health issues and then decided to make it my career to help other people with that and definitely enjoy my self-care process. What about, so when you're saying like, okay, the sun represents vitality and consciousness and the moon represents the body and flesh, etc. Can you explain that a little bit further? Like, would you have to look at somebody's each individual sign? And, if somebody is a Virgo sun, that means something specific for their health versus a Taurus sun. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yes. So each sign is going to have a different type of behavioral process, a different way of moving through life that can correlate with some of the health issues that they might encounter within their life. So, Virgo, the sun, the moon, as well, maybe even Mars, these placements are going to be dealing with sometimes a sense of anxiety. Virgo is a place where we have a little bit of that neuroticism come out because of that need or that desire for perfection, for purification, for things being in their place and in their order. So Virgo has a hard time with letting go of a sense of control, and that's where they can suffer from having some anxiety that comes up, some mental distress that comes up.
Mm,
That's also because of the ruler of that sign. So again, the basics of the health can come through the sun and the moon, but every single planet can contribute to one's health and well-being if we're looking at the chart. And so Mercury is the ruler of Virgo, and Mercury is that planet that we connect to the mind, intellect, logic, to our sense of critical thinking. And so when someone is Virgo dominant, they're going to be more mentally dominant. And that's something that they can work through. And again, the birth chart is not a static thing where it's a snapshot
mm,
and then we are forever that. We are here to work with our birth chart to bring conscious awareness to these patterns and then ultimately transcend. That's also why we have cycles. So we have something like the Saturn return at 28 to 30. It's going to feel very different the next time it comes around at 58 to 60. And those
mm,
cycles come up to give us a different flavor of that same lesson and go, hey, actually, I've made a lot of changes. Actually, I've put a lot of conscious awareness into this space. And this type of lesson either doesn't affect me as powerfully, or I know how to handle it now with more grace and I can move forward. So just because you might have some of these behavioral patterns that come up, or even certain health things, they are something they can work through. And that's something I see a lot with my older clients. I will bring up certain things in the birth chart and they're like, oh yeah, that was me in my 20s. Definitely learned that lesson. Definitely a different person now.
Mm, okay. Okay. So then maybe just wrapping up the health portion, if somebody really wanted to dive in deep with that type of stuff, medical astrology, like find a really good medical astrologer. Okay.
Exactly. You can work with a medical astrologer. There's also another branch that I think is very profound, which is herbalism that is tied with astrology. There's a wonderful man named Saja Popham. He runs a whole program, and he has a book called Evolutionary Herbalism, where he's working with the alchemical text, the astrological side of working with medicine as well. So he's planting, he's tending to, and he's harvesting with the astrological knowledge of cycles in order to bring the best potency to the medicine, because we can actually look at plants and herbs and different things that we find in nature with correlations to planetary bodies. So we can tell when a plant is more sun focused or more moon focused or has a more mercurial energy to it. And I think that that is going to be a very important step forward. I wouldn't say that this is a brand new thing. I think it's also actually a returning and remembering of ancient ways. But I think it's going to be more prevalent in the coming years as people take more control of their health and turn to these more natural medicines that we have available. So I would also look into that space as well.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool. I feel like if I had more time in my life right now, I would start studying that, and maybe I will in my future just for fun. But
I have it bookmarked.
that would be so cool to bring to my clients and be like, okay, also let's look at your functional labs and your past history, et cetera. But also send me your astrology, your chart, your date of birth, and let me help you understand that and kind of choose from, I don't know, herbs or different things based on your chart as well. And then even using herbs from people who are tending to them in this manner that make them more potent. That's wow. That is so cool. I love this
It's
stuff.
There's so much. There's so many different schools, and that's what's amazing about astrology. There's so many different ways that we can use it to our advantage. We can embody the astrology and work with the cycles of nature, because ultimately it is, right? And astrology really reminds us of the principle of as above, so below. What's swirling in the cosmos is swirling here on Earth, and we
Mhm,
see that through our own personal lives and also in the collective and events that happen. And the tracking of that is mundane astrology. So it's
mhm.
really amazing how that has been passed down for thousands of years from ancestors, this observation. And when you know how to use it well, you can really have an advantage in life.
Yeah. Okay. I have kind of a dark question, and this will be really quick, but can you predict someone's death through astrology?
There is a death prediction technique that is
Ooh.
from Hellenistic times. So Hellenistic astrology was around 300 BC to 300 AD, around the time after Alexander the Great and the conquest and the merging of the Greco-Roman Egyptian astrological learnings and texts at that time. So that was a really important time for astrology and the refinement of techniques and the recording of techniques. And I do know that there is a death prediction technique. I have not learned it. I don't know if I really want to.
I don't want to know.
I don't necessarily yeah, I don't necessarily feel like I need to know that or would want to predict that for someone else. But there are places in the chart that have a more death focus in them as well. And so when someone dies, and then we can look back, and that's another aspect of astrology. It's
Mhm.
really great to use astrology to look in hindsight and see the correlations and the patterns. We can sometimes see how the death really lines up with certain aspects in the chart, whether that would be the fourth house, the eighth house, the seventh house. Those are areas where we might see the sun setting on someone or the death kind of coming through. And as well, we can see that in charts of family members who are experiencing the death of a loved one. They're going to have certain activations, whether again in those houses or through
Mm.
Pluto or Saturn can sometimes trigger loss in that way.
I'll have to ask you to do this later for me, but I would love to look back at my chart at a couple of those in my life. We'll talk about that later. Um, Tell listeners how challenging moments like that, for example, are actually all a part of their life plan.
So, we are not here to just live a life of bliss and roses. And that is important because it's the moments of challenge that are polishing the diamond, that are wiping away the dust on the mirror, right? And
Mm.
these are reflected in the chart. We all come here with lessons to learn, and those lessons can look wildly different from one person to the next. That's why it's really important to try not to compare yourself to other people and to really stay in your lane of growth and your lane of conscious awareness. So, in the chart, a lot of the emphasis of growth comes from Saturn. And Saturn works in 7-year cycles. So we can look at the age 7, a lot of times is that development of consciousness of right versus wrong, of morality starting to kick in. We look at age 14. That's going to be when we're trying to separate from our authority of trying to gain some independence from the parental figures. 21 is going to be when some of us might be falling in love or starting out our first big career, trying to figure out where we want to live and be in our 20s. And then we come to the Saturn return, and that's at the end of the 20s, where we are fully stepping into adulthood. We're grieving the loss of our youth in some ways. We are taking on more responsibility and commitment. And when we look at the chart, those are going to be cycles for everyone. And then within that, we have our own personal moments of cycles where Saturn might be aspecting a lot of our natal planets. And we're going through a time of deep constriction, of loss, of life taking away something from us that we have attached ourselves to working out, to having, and that is so dear to us. And ultimately, these moments of pain and loss are really trying to awaken us to the true nature of ourselves and our spirit. They are asking us to lean in with more trust and surrender to the greater flow of life and the greater cycles that are moving through us. So our personal growth and our personal challenges are intertwined and intermixed with the collective challenges, right? We have our own personal stories of growth, and then we all went through that collective experience of pandemic and
Mhm.
lockdowns and the trauma and stress that comes from that. And that is seen in the sky. There was a very big a conjunction that ushered in the pandemic. It was the Saturn Pluto conjunction of 2020. So astrologers have been looking at that for a few years, going, okay, we've got something big on the horizon.
Whoa.
And so that was a collective journey of learning, of growth. It's the stripping away of that which is not to be true anymore. And that's a lot of times what the harder transits that we go through are meant to do. They're meant to really strip away places where we've been too complacent, too comfortable, staying in something out of sheer convenience, or we're not pushing our own growth edge. So life will enact a crisis for us in order to push us into that growth. Because we can be resistant, we can dig our heels in, but the more we do that, the universe whispers and then it talks and then it screams, right? And we can see
Mhm.
that in the astrology as well.
Okay. You mentioned Saturn return. So we have the 7-year cycles of Saturn, but then we have the Saturn return, which is every 4 cycles, four of those cycles, right?
Yes.
Okay. So before the podcast, I made sure that I looked at our audience and I found out that as of right now, 19% of my audience is age 28 to 34, meaning that 19% of my audience, and most of them are female as well. I think it's like 70% females. So 19% of my audience is in their first Saturn return in this very moment. And
Wow.
then get this, for actually my largest section of my audience, 40% of them is age 45 to 59, which would be right before the second Saturn return. Is that correct? Like kind of
Yes.
leading right into that. Okay.
The end of the 50s
And
is the second Saturn return. And then actually around 42, we have another big moment of initiation, which is the Uranus opposition.
oh, okay. I didn't know about that one. So what advice, well, maybe tell us about the Saturn returns and then advice for people going through those. What does this mean for our lives?
Okay, so the Saturn return is a transit that sometimes people have heard of in their day-to-day life. We even see people like Adele who have talked about their Saturn return, and at the end of her Saturn return had made her album 30 and really was a love letter to her Saturn return in some ways. And one of her first major public performances, she wore earrings that were little Saturns and she got a Saturn tattoo. So she was very impacted by her Saturn return. I think she's a Capricorn too. Taurus, maybe a Taurus. So the Saturn return is a time of course correction. It is where Saturn comes back to the place where you had Saturn natally in the birth chart. So, for instance, Saturn is currently in Pisces. I was born during the years where Saturn was in Pisces back in the 90s. So I am in my Saturn return. There are certain astrologers that feel that the Saturn return is only around the peak when you are in the orb of the conjunction. So the certain degrees that are going to be closely impacting your natal Saturn. And then there are many astrologers, including myself, who believe that the entire transit, the entire time that Saturn is in that sign, you're going to be feeling and impacted by the Saturn return energy. And so this is roughly a 2.5-year transit. And this is a time when we are growing up. It's the time where we get the Saturn rings around our neck. We start to realize, oh, we're getting a few more wrinkles, maybe some gray hairs. We're starting to show signs of aging. Sometimes it can be a larger crisis. Sometimes people do get diagnosed with chronic illness at this time. Some people go through the loss of a grandparent or a parent. And that sense of mortality really starts to make itself known at this time. So Saturn is the boundary of our solar system where we can see with the naked eye. So we can look at Saturn as like the fence and the limitation. And this is also the planet that we look to for time. And so time is really felt during the Saturn return and it feels heavy. We feel like time is passing by, whether we like it or not. And so if we haven't been on track to our goals and our dreams, if we feel like things have really passed us by and all of a sudden we're just like, whoa, I'm not where I want to be, the Saturn return makes that very painfully clear at times. And so this is a time as well where people might change careers, change direction. People can get married for the first time, have children as well. We're looking at some of the houses that always get impacted by the Saturn return, which this is another Hellenistic technique, is the 6th and 7th and 8th houses, because you're going to have perfection years or years where those themes are highlighted. So the 6th house is very much career, routine, and health. The 7th house is marriage and partnership. And the 8th house is inheritance, taxes, death, shared resources. So those themes usually always come up for people during the Saturn return. And so we can look at this as like, oh, the dreaded Saturn return, like my life is going to fall apart. No, the things that need to fall apart during the Saturn return are ultimately trying to get you onto the path that makes the most sense for you, your skills, your success in life, and your legacy. Because a big aspect of Saturn, people always say Saturn doesn't deny. It delays, but it does not deny. And so we can think about Saturn really delaying certain things at this time so we can take stock in them, and then we can reach for that success. And a lot of times we'll see the fruits of the Saturn return start to really come up around age 33 to 34 as well. And so, as much as it can be a time of sadness, sometimes grief, and sometimes heaviness, it ultimately is bringing us into a greater sense of wisdom. And again, that second Saturn return, that's the transition from being an adult and being really in the working sphere, in the parenthood chapter of your life, into transitioning into an elder where, okay, you've lived a lot of your life at this point, and now we're looking back and reflecting, what do you want to do with these final decades of your life? How do you want to give back to younger generations? How can you lead and share your wisdom? And so that also is a moment of transition that we can resist. And some people do, it's like, oh, I'll go buy the crazy sports car and try to date someone 30 years younger than me. Like, we see people that resist these moments of maturity, right? Or we can lean in with curiosity, with honor, with grace, and accept that Saturn is ushering in a new cycle of life for us.
Yeah, this would be called the midlife crisis for the people who have heard that. Everyone's heard that term, but it's really like your second Saturn return is coming.
Mhm.
What
And
if
the Uranus opposition as well in the 40s.
Oh, okay.
That also is like big time midlife crisis for some people.
Okay, I want you to touch on that in a second, but if somebody quick question, if somebody doesn't learn the lessons in the first Saturn return, the universe is like screaming at you, right, to make changes, but you don't, what happens after that? Do you just keep getting those screams, or is there like, does it hit you harder in the second Saturn return? What is that process like?
It can. And I find that with certain clients, a lot of things will come up and rear its head again at the first Saturn square after the Saturn return. So that's around age 35 to 36. And that is another time where people get asked to really dig in and dig deep, because that's that first check in. Have you been implementing your Saturn return? If
Mm,
not, it can be very much another crisis point. And so I've seen certain people where the lessons will come up at the Saturn return. They might resist it for a few more years, and then they will definitely get the hit at age 35, 36.
okay. And then let's bump up to a few more years later, this 42 Uranus point. What is that?
So Uranus is that first planet that is past the boundary of Saturn. So we didn't discover Uranus until I want to say the late 1700s, around the time of the American and French Revolution. And Uranus is our planet of liberation, freedom, revolution, technology, progress. We can almost think of Uranus as like a Prometheus aspect. And Prometheus gave fire to humans. It was actually kind of interesting. I just saw Oppenheimer, and they had the first part of Oppenheimer. They talk about Prometheus stealing fire from Olympus, giving it to the humans, and then was tortured for eternity for giving this to the humans, right? And so with Uranus, we can think about that freedom and revolution and progress. There's always a sacrifice to be made with that as well. The people who are on the fringe, there's a sense of loneliness that can come from being ahead of a generation, right? And Uranus is very much connected with the sign of Aquarius. And so Uranus is a very destabilizing force.
Mm,
Saturn loves structure. Saturn wants you to get a structure in place. Saturn wants you to have a foundation in place. Uranus wants to shake the foundation. It wants to break you out of a groove. And so there are times where if we've been very heavy in our Saturnian energy in life, which is tradition, rules, playing the game, doing things in the way that we were told was the greatest measure of success in some ways. And we haven't been bringing in enough Uranus energy, which is like, who are you individually outside of the conditioning of all of the structure? Uranus will come and shake your grooves up at that time. And for people who are very heavy in that Uranus energy, that cutting edge energy, it actually can be a time where you publish some of your greatest life works. So Copernicus and Newton and some of these great scientists and thinkers actually published some of their greatest works around the time of their Uranus opposition. I can also recommend an amazing book by Richard Tarnas. It's called Cosmos and Psyche. And he really dives into different transits and how they impact us on a collective level and a personal level through decades and decades of research. He has very much a heavy academic background as well. So he really wanted to approach it from like a university level background, the aspects of astrology. So he goes into the Uranus opposition and how Freud and Jung and many of the great thinkers really published these defining, paradigm shifting essays and papers and declarations that changed the way we fundamentally view our world. And so that's something that can happen at the Uranus return. I'm sorry, the Uranus opposition as well around age 42. And you do have a Uranus return if you make it to it around age 84.
Okay. So to sum up what someone should do around the Saturn return, moving to this Uranus opposition, I'm going to try and sum this up. Listen to any kinds of nudges in your life, work on personal development, work on things like get your shit together, basically. But at the same time, who are you? Have some freedom, have some play, make sure that it's not just like all work and head under the ground, so that when the Uranus point comes or the Uranus opposition, you're not having this midlife crisis point where you go off the walls. Is that accurate?
Exactly. Saturn says you have to have a certain level of structure and foundation in place. But then Uranus also wants to shake you up and see what else you can do to move past that growth edge into new territory in our 40s. So that also is going to be a different theme when you look at your chart. So somebody who has Saturn in Pisces is going to have a very different time than someone who has Saturn in Aries. Same with the Uranus opposition. If that opposition is happening in Gemini and Sagittarius, that's very different than Scorpio and Taurus. So you would take those things into account as well when we're looking at how it's going to thematically impact your life.
Okay, incredible. I want to switch gears with the little bit of time we have left and talk about locational astrology a little bit, because we just did my locational astrology, a week or two ago. And I mean, you blew my mind. I was like, I just couldn't believe it. So what is locational astrology?
Okay, so locational astrology or astrocartography is actually a newer branch of astrology that was developed in the 20th century. And it pretty much looks like a map of the world and these ley lines where you are mapping out the lines of the planetary bodies. And so there's different lines according to different areas of the chart. So you can have a Venus ascendant line, a Venus IC line, a Venus descendant line, or a Venus midheaven line. And those are the 4 points or angles in one's chart that we can kind of look to as the cross of life. And the ascendant really is the determining factor of those 4 points in the chart. And so when we're looking at our astrological chart, we can see where we have our strengths and our challenges. And we might feel called to, without even knowing this chart, obviously, called to places where we are activated by these lines. So, for example, I went to college in Tucson, Arizona. I had never visited Tucson in my life. I kind of went on a whim because I had very good opportunity that came through to me through the University of Arizona. And being there, I had a really beautiful experience of expansion, of learning. Tucson was where I actually started to dive into astrology and some of the higher learning and paths that were coming forward for myself. And I'm also a day chart. So Jupiter is my most beneficial planet when I look at my day chart. I have a Jupiter line right through Tucson, Arizona. Did not know it. And so we can see as well, looking back on our lives, places that we might have been drawn to where we are going to learn aspects of that planetary body and have experiences that are thematically related to that as well. Something we also found with your reading is that you can meet people from these lines and they're going to impact you with the influence of that line. So you might have a Venus line through Paris, France, and then end up meeting someone from Paris and starting a relationship with them in the United States.
Yeah.
And they are bringing that, the influence of the Venus line from Paris to you. So that's another aspect that we can look at with the locational astrology. It's really amazing. And it's really great if you are somebody who loves to travel, who's interested even in living abroad, or is someone who has certain career focuses and wants to take advantage of that line. Like if you're a writer and you really want to go take advantage of your Mercury line, you can go and have a writing retreat there. So there's a lot of different ways we can use locational astrology.
Yeah. And I even think of the people who, I mean, there's so many people who don't travel, people who, which to me is bananas, but you know, they like they grew up in a small town or a town, whatever. They found their partner, they got married there, they stay there. But what if you dove into your chart and you found out that if actually you moved from Florida and you went to Oregon or something, just as an example, you might have a life that is 10 times better, that makes you more money, that creates better partnerships for you. It's just so cool to, if you just look at this, it allows you to kind of think outside the box a little bit of where might you actually be best positioned. And I had no clue about this at all until I think like 3 weeks ago when I was looking at your services and I reached out to you about this. I was like, what is that? And we did discover that I have gone to multiple places where I have a line through. And even this, right now I'm in Spain and I am in the Canary Islands and I'm very, very close to a line through one of these islands. And guys, there are not a lot of lines, okay? Like there are hundreds of islands. The world is so big. Yet I intuitively have traveled to or gone to many of these places and have had certain profound experiences in these places without even knowing it. And so now I just have more knowledge of kind of planning out my travels and understanding what may be more beneficial or even not so beneficial. Can you talk about, are there downsides? Are there negative aspects to certain lines?
So there definitely can be. And that's where we'd want to look at the specificity of your chart because going to a Mars line, a Saturn line, or a Pluto line could be challenging. But you might be dominant in that energy, or that energy is well placed in your chart. You could have Mars in Capricorn. That's Mars in its exaltation. So going to a Mars line could actually be really beneficial for you. And that's where you want to work with an astrologer and not just go, this line good, that line bad. And I always say to people too, if you're really drawn somewhere and it's an intense line, say you're really drawn to a Pluto line, I wouldn't say don't go. I would actually say there's something there that's going to be part of maybe the evolution of your soul, or learning to uncover a sense of some part of your shadow or an ancestral shadow that could come forward. That is good. That's going to provide some sense of healing. So every line has an opportunity, but I have through working with clients, I've been able to talk about places that they've gone. And I've had a client where he had some really amazing lines through the western side of India and then some challenging lines on the eastern side. And this is somebody who really loved to travel to India a lot during his life. And he said that on that western side, yes, he met amazing people. He started aspects of his business, like it was always really beautiful and gentle and receiving for him. But then on the eastern side, the two times he had tried to go over there, he had to deal with a robbery. He had to deal with a weather event, and it just never seemed to work out. There was a challenge that would come up. So I've definitely seen and witnessed from clients that split. And to know too, like, okay, there are certain places, if you're going for a relaxing vacation, maybe don't go to that Pluto line for a relaxing vacation. If that's something that is calling to you as more of a pilgrimage, then definitely go. And that's something as well for people who feel a sense of pilgrimage to places in the world, to sacred places. The locational astrology can be really amazing as well, in terms of working with that energy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's just touch on like one more topic. Do you feel like you want to share a little bit about Mayan cosmology or tarot?
Ooh. I would love to share about Mayan cosmology because I feel like it's such a powerful, intricate, complex, and dynamic system and observation, ancestral observation. And I've really learned so much from it in the past few years. So let's talk about that.
Good, because that's what I wanted to talk about, because I don't know what Mayan cosmology is. And I know that you have even gone to Guatemala and lived in Guatemala as a part of your studies and a part of your life over the past few years. So give us the details of what Mayan cosmology is and how it can also benefit us.
Okay, so the Mayan cosmovision is a very profound and beautiful and complex system of creation, of existence. And there are Mayan spiritual guides who dedicate their lives to understanding this system, understanding the creation, understanding the energies that are around us. So there are 20 chumilal or noales, and those are the animal energies that are connected to the chumilal or the chumil, that's the star. And these energies permeate throughout our world and other dimensions.
Mm.
And we can work with these energies through the observation of the Cholki or the Zolkin calendar. And you can call it calendar. You can also call it count of time, right? It's a way of observing and counting time. And this is a ceremonial calendar. There are two counts of time or calendars that we can look to. There's the Hab, and that's the agricultural calendar that's more connected to that 364 day calendar. And then this calendar that we work with, the ceremonial or the spiritual calendar, is a 260-day cycle. So about 9 months. And we can think about the time that a child is in gestation, that 9-month period.
Mm.
And so these energies, these 20 chumilal or nawales, they are in a count. We go through cycles of 20, and then we go through cycles of 13. And that's considered a trecena. And that is going to also give us information about how we are working with that chumil that day. So there are 13 galactic tones or energies, 1 through 13, and they each have a significance to them connected to the chumil. And so working with this system, and I had the privilege and the honor to study under Tata Isaias Mendoza, Nana Isabel Perez, and Tata Walter, and in San Marcos La Laguna at Lake Atitlan in Guatemala. And they are the most amazing teachers. I've also been diving in more with other teachers online, specifically the Mayan Wisdom Project. And these Noales, these chumil, when you observe something, the same thing with astrology. When you observe something, its influence and its presence will make itself more known to you as well. And through the observation in my time in Guatemala and working with these energies, it's incredibly potent, their medicine, their presence in this world, in our life. And we are all born under a chumil, a star, a noel. And so we can work with that energy as well. And it's been very profound to work with my chumil, which I'm born under the energy of Kan, which is the serpent. It's connected to Kukulkan, Kukulmats, Quetzalcoatl, and that's what region of Guatemala or Mexico you're talking about the feathered serpent. And the energy I was born under, the Trisena I was born under, Tihash, the obsidian blade. And these energies really connect me in my astrology as well to my North Node, to my Jupiter and Pluto aspect. And the North Node is very much the evolutionary point where the soul wants to go forward into. So I've always been very connected to Taurus in my chart. I have my sun in Taurus. I'm a Virgo rising, my Cancer moon. I've been very connected to those energies: feminine, gentle, soft, social, comfy. I like, the sensual pleasures of life. And actually, through connecting with the Mayan cosmology and the Mayan cosmovision, it's really pulled me into my North Node. It's really pulled me into this aspect of my chart. And it's helped me to understand my place as a healer, as someone who is here for deep cellular transformation, is here to be a guide, to be a death doula for other people who are birthing into new aspects of themselves, into new beings. I'm here to embody more of an intensity than I thought I actually had within me. And so that has been a very profound part of my journey. And the way that the Mayans work with these chumilal or nahuales is very much centered around the kotsi, or the fire ceremony. And so the fire is a really important core aspect of the Mayan tradition, of the Mayan way of connecting with the Great Spirit, or Ahau. And in these kotsi, in these ceremonies, they will connect with all the 20 nahuales and all of the 13 galactic tones. So that makes for 260, right? That 9-month cycle. Prayers are made for all 260 aspects in every Mayan fire ceremony. And these ceremonies can go on for hours. There's no time. Time does not exist in this place. As much time is needed to make sure that prayers are made, that offerings are made, that things are attended to in the ceremony. That's how much time it takes. And so these people are offering copal and incense and seeds and corn and cacao to the fire, and giving back to the creation. All of these energies that make up our existence, make up our creation, make up our life. They are giving back and giving thanks and asking for their help in guiding us. These are our elders. These are our spiritual guides in this dimension and in many dimensions. I was just listening in the Mayan Wisdom Project. They were talking about how the Mayans will say that there are 400 dimensions any which way that you look. So they're almost on this space of quantum energy long before the modern scientists were picking up on it, right? They understand that we're living in a multidimensional experience. And so working with these nahuales and really intertwining them with the Western astrological observance. I mean, these two systems were thousands and thousands of miles away, but these were ancestors that were looking up at the night sky, but also observing nature, right? That's why we have these animal archetypes. That's why we have these animal aspects and guides to not only the Western astrological observations, but the Mayan observations as well. And so understanding that cosmic energy, the cosmic swirl, is also connected to the way nature moves, the cycles of nature, the way the animals move through the forest, the way the fish move through the sea, the lakes, the rivers. And so through these observations, we're able to understand the energies of our time. And so I really like to look at when a planet is ingressing into a new sign and looking at the medicine and the wisdom we're receiving of that day through the Mayan cosmovision, as well, like the full moon or the new moon, looking at where the energy is landing, and what Shumil is guiding us in that day really gives a depth, a nuance to the energy. And I find a lot of times there's this deep synchronicity. The day that we just started this Trisena that we're in, no, that's the energy of the woodpecker. And this energy, this chumil, this Nawal, is most related to the mind in the Mayan cosmovision, the mind, logic, intelligence. And this Trisena started on the day that we had Mercury retrograde start, and then we had the sign of Virgo season start. And Virgo is the rulership and exaltation of Mercury. And Mercury is that energy. So these two really like paired so nicely together on that day, ushering in this very mercurial energy we're now working with as we leave Leo season. And so that's where some of my work has been coming in, of threading these two systems together to really get more depth in our observation of our time and understanding the auspices that are around us, right? When we observe and we honor these guides, whether they're celestial guides, animal guides, spirit guides, they will communicate back with us if we are willing to fine tune our instrument, our senses, to be able to communicate in ways that aren't just through words, that aren't just through the mind, they're through ultimately the heart.
So do we need to go through a fire ceremony, or is like, how do we access this? Have you been through a fire ceremony? I'm sure you have.
I have. I've been through many fire ceremonies with my teachers and with other tatas and nanas in Guatemala. I've had the honor of being there for Wayab, which is the shortest month of the Mayan agricultural calendar. And so there was a lot of ceremony to usher in a new year. And this is a wonderful way to get in touch with the Noales. And again, Mayan Wisdom Project does have free online ceremonies where they are broadcasting from Guatemala
Oh,
a
wow.
Potsi. And so that is a great resource if you can't get to Guatemala to sit in with honor and respect, because it is a space where you're opening up with spirit. So you do want to come with respect to the space, and to observe a fire ceremony. As well, there are other resources online that maybe we can put in the show notes, for starting to observe the Mayan count of time. There are a few accounts on Instagram I really like. The fourpillars.net. Mark Elmy lives in Guatemala. He was initiated as an Ahki, which is a Mayan spiritual guide, and he shares so much on the days of the Mayan count of time. And he has, I think, 6 or 7 years of daily observation that he shares. So that's another really great resource. But if you are definitely interested, getting yourself to Guatemala or getting yourself to southern Mexico and experiencing the energies there, because there's so much prayer, there's so much offering, there's so much reverence, the energy is very present in the day-to-day, moving through that space. And so it's really beautiful to see and witness. And the Mayan tradition and the Mayan way of life is so beautiful and is so connected to the earth and to the cycles, the natural cycles of life, the rhythm of life that I think a lot of Western society has been disconnected from.
I will report back, because I will 100% go to a fire ceremony next year. For people listening, we just talked about the location lines in astrology, and I have 2 giant ones going straight through Guatemala, and very close to the lake that Samantha was just talking about. And so I would love to do that, but also a soul retrieval ceremony. I was told by a good friend who has traveled all over the world and it is very much into this type of stuff, that I should do a soul retrieval ceremony. Do you have any knowledge on those?
So the soul retrieval, I think, is also found in many different cultures that have a shamanic tradition,
Okay.
um, not just in Guatemala. And the soul retrieval is a process where there's a belief that when you go through something traumatic, like a really intense car accident or giving birth, and it was a very traumatic experience, there can be part of your soul that stepped away out of that place of deep fear or trauma, or energetically got stuck in the event, the time and space of the event. And
Yeah.
so a soul retrieval is essentially a process and a ceremony where you are calling back that energy into yourself. You're calling that piece of your soul back into yourself. I have not gone through personally a soul retrieval ceremony, even though I think it is very profound. And I think that there's a lot of healing that can come from going through a soul retrieval ceremony. And as well, there's also ancestral lineage ceremonies that are happening in Guatemala. And there are women and men who are very connected, like I said, to the fire. The fire is a cornerstone of the Mayan tradition, who can work with the fire, who can read the fire, who they can get insight into your life, into your family lineage through the fire, and then work through a ceremony to help you with the healing of different aspects going on in your family lineage. So there's so much going on that is past the realm of our conventional spheres of looking at healing and medicine, but are profound. And, another aspect with the Mayan tradition is the preservation of the importance of dreams and the dream space.
Mm.
So there are many guides, including my teacher, Isaias, who was put on his path of becoming an Arki, of becoming a Mayan spiritual guide, of sharing the Mayan tradition through a dream that he had when he was 15. He was not on that path before. And an ancestor came to him in his dream and showed him which way he needed to go. There are many women who, when they become teenagers, they will be shown in a dream that they're meant to become a midwife. And so that aspect of the dream space is really important for messages from spirit, from our ancestors, from animals that help to guide us on our path. And so the Mayan tradition has really kept that connection to spirit through the process of dreams. And that's another space where I've felt really inspired to be more in touch with my own dreams for guidance and for working through other aspects of the subconscious.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, we could talk about this all day.
I know.
I have one really selfish question. Do you know what energy I am of my Mayan energy?
Ooh, yes. I can look that up right now.
Okay.
And if there are those in the audience that are interested in learning about their Mayan cross of life, my teacher in Guatemala, Isaias, he offers Mayan cross readings, and he will do them virtually over Zoom or FaceTime. And so that's a really great resource. And if you ever find yourself in San Marcos de la Laguna in Guatemala, he owns a shop called Lava Love Cacao, where they offer both a cacao ceremony that works with the Noales of the day. And again, the cacao ceremony is not a Mayan tradition. This isn't something that goes back to ancient times. The fire ceremony goes back to ancient times, the Kutsi. The Mayan cacao ceremony, and the way that it is offered, is more of a creative offering, working with the Noales in a different way than the fire. And they also offer the fire ceremony. So when you go, Rachel, you can go over to Lava Love and have a ceremony. It's incredible. It
I
is
am gonna have a
one of the most
ball when I'm
profound
there.
experiences.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see what sign you are.
And then we'll do a speed round. We'll wrap up here in a second.
Beautiful.
It sounds like we have lots of resources to put in the show notes for you guys. So we'll definitely get those in there. Yes, you found it.
Yes, I did. So
Okay.
you are born under the energy of 11 Eek. And Eek is the sign of, it's the Nawal of the hummingbird. And it's connected to the
Interesting.
wind and to breath. And Eek is very much a higher consciousness energy that we can relate to more of the upper world. And so Eek is interested in the sweetness and the also the strength of communication and um to bring in something new, something fresh, a hope and innocence. We can think about the hummingbird too. It's adapted as well to higher elevations as well. It's this beautiful bird, but it also can really move in a lot of different ways and in a lot of different climates. um, and we can talk more on the side about your Mayan sign.
Okay.
But you were born under Eek, and that is under the Trisena of Eh, and that is the wildcat, and that is about finding your sacred path. But Eek specifically, very much a communication oriented sign. So
Okay.
going
Very
back to the
cool.
podcast.
Yes, I love this stuff. Okay. Well, it sounds like we can put resources for people who want to dive into this stuff. It's you have amazing people for referrals, and of course, you are an outstanding astrologer, and we'll talk more about how people can reach you in a second here. But let's
Thank
wrap
you.
up with a quick speed round. Um, okay, so first thing that comes to your mind, don't overthink it. What is your favorite thing to do for stress reduction or self-care?
Taking a bath.
Okay.
I love a well-planned bath with bubbles, with salts, with candles. I love a good bath.
Okay. If you could travel anywhere in the world right now, where would it be?
There's two places. I would really like to check out Bali. It's been on my list for a long time. I have a Venus line through Bali, which I've never been to a Venus line, and Portugal. I feel very connected to Portugal and checking that out.
Okay. I have confirmed I'm going to be in Portugal in November. So if you want to come, you should come in November.
Oh, this is tempting.
Yeah. Okay. What is the best purchase you've made in the last year that cost you under $100? This is a tough one.
Yes, it is. I did end up buying a red light panel that I really love to use.
Oh, okay. That was not $100 though. That had to be more. Was it
It's
100?
not a super expensive one, but it
Okay.
was close to $100, but it's I find it's really great to use, especially if it's I'm not getting a lot of sun on a certain day.
Mm-hmm. Helps with the mood, probably for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And last question, if you could leave the listeners with one tip that they could implement into their routine or their life this week that can help them just live a healthier, happier life overall, what would that be?
Be open to the signs and the communication around you that want to come forward through nature, through guides, and through people that you meet passing by throughout the day. If you can open your energy, your field, your aura, whatever you want to think about it as, I'm open to receiving guidance, that would be my tip to moving through life with a little bit more help than maybe you're used to.
Hmm, I love that. Okay. Where can people find you, reach out to you, chat with you, work with you? Go ahead and share all of that.
So you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Hands of Mercury. And I've been more active on Instagram, but I'm going to be starting to get more active again on TikTok. There's a lot of platforms and things. I love to do astrology, but then you have to do all the business things. You can reach me on my website, handsofmercury.com. I offer natal chart consultations. I offer current transits. So we look at what's impacting your chart right now. I offer the locational astrology, Relationship readings, I absolutely love those readings as well. Oh, you can find out so much. That's not just for romantic partnerships, that's for friendships, that's for business partnerships, that's for mother and there's parent and child.
Ooh.
So many different ways you can work with a relationship chart using different techniques, and you can learn so much. I do offer human design consultations as well. I've been studying that for a few years, and tarot, which was my first foray into the space of divination and self exploration through the intuitive senses. I started that when I was a teenager. So I offer all of those things online. I also offer a very specific type of Reiki that's a planetary remediation Reiki. So Reiki is a type of energy work, energy healing, and I've been practicing Reiki since 2018. And I started to involve the cosmic energies, working with the planetary bodies, working with the Nawales, invoking certain energies through the healing session. So I found that to be a really profound way to kind of bring a potency to the energetic healing space. And yeah, I would love to work with you on understanding your cosmic potential, understanding your lessons, understanding your different strengths. And I also will be offering an Astrology 101 coming to consciousness through the natal chart class on September 23rd. So that's going to be available on my website and also on consciouscityguide.com. And it's a 75-minute virtual class. I'm going to dive into the chart, the 12 zodiac signs, the 12 houses, the planets, the aspects, and really get you in a good place to dive into your personal chart. Because I'm a professional astrologer and I've been studying this for about a decade now, and I still find out new things about my chart when I dive in. So there's so many layers down deep that you can go into the chart. And so I want to give people a really good foundation to be able to look to their chart from time to time. So,
Okay. Amazing. We'll put the link to that, and especially that class. So that's September 23rd, 2023. And today is August 29th. This podcast will actually be out this week. So it's really, really good timing. So if you're listening to this week, you have a pretty much a whole month to get signed up for that class. And this was so much fun. I know we honestly probably could record a whole day of a podcast about this stuff.
truly.
But thank you for your wisdom and your resources. And thank you so much for being on the show.
Of course. Thank you so much, Rachel, for having me. And I really hope our paths get to cross in person again, because it's been a few years since Costa Rica, but I have a funny feeling that they will.
I do too. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like this video and comment, letting me know what you enjoyed and what you want to see more of. Also, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you get alerts when new content is coming out and you don't miss any videos. And just a quick reminder that this information is for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any illness or medical condition. Please consult with a qualified healthcare professional before making any changes to your diet, exercise routine, supplements, or medical treatment. If you're looking for a functional medicine practitioner, please reach out to me. And thank you again for watching, and keep striving to become your healthiest, happiest self.